Ladies and gentlemen, damas y caballeros, it's Leave It in the Ring.
And welcome to another edition of Leaving Radio. I'm your host, Dave Duenas, with my co-host, the Milk Car. It's been a minute since we've been back. We got a lot of stuff to hand wrap here on Leaving the Ring. Be sure to jab that button, uppercut the notification bell. Don't leave it up to the judges to let you know when we're on live here. Let's talk some boxing, man. Canelo weekend, Cinco de Mayo. A lot of stuff happened. A lot of stuff unfolded. Obviously, I got to eat a little crow there, Mokar, because I thought it was going to be a boring 12 rounds of survival mode when it came to Billy Joe Saunders. And, a lot of folks were counting out that Canelo was not going to be able to cut that ring off, which he really didn't. But that he was going to have a lot more struggle against Saunders. And you know what? I mean, the scorecards that I saw from like Mannix and a few other folks saying that it was close. I don't know if you had it close, but I got to tell you this. I had it 6-2. I mean, if you want 2 rounds, to me, it's not very close. I didn't see, I saw Canelo pretty dominant in this fight. Judging is always, it's based on what you like and what you think, but there's a criteria that you're supposed to follow. One of the major ones was the ring generalship, and I thought that this was Canelo's fight. He did what he wanted to do. He rested when he wanted to rest. And if my memory serves me right, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, how do you give a guy surviving with pity pat shots when everybody said that Danny Jacobs couldn't do that? And so because of that reason, there was no way in hell he was winning any rounds against Gennady Golovkin. But BJ Saunders can do that and win rounds? I'm confused here.
Well, you do have people who favor volume punching over the kind of hard body shots that Canelo was landing early on. And even if you don't give Canelo those rounds, overall, except for about 2 rounds where it did seem like he was struggling a little bit to kind of catch Billy Joe and kind of get into his rhythm.
Right.
He seemed to be in control of the fight. One thing I will say, though, is you're right. A lot of people did say that Billy Joe would show up and kind of be very defensive for 12 rounds and kind of stink it out.
Right.
He probably could have done that if he just wanted to survive the 12 rounds and walk away with a payday. But to his credit, I do think that he was trying to win the fight, and he was doing the best he could for as long as he could.
As much as I can't stand the guy as a human being, I got to give him his credit. He actually stood there and tried to trade shots, The head movement of Canelo wasn't there that night. And the reason I believe it wasn't, this is just solely what my eyes saw and what my brain was telling me, is he really didn't have any respect for Billy Joe's power. And versus when he fought like Danny Jacobs, the head movement, even the head movement against Smith, it was evident. Here, he kind of just kept his hands up, and he saw that there was going to be flickering jabs, and he kind of beautifully just timed it, walked it, and capitalized on it. Again, I thought that BJ was going to blow the place up with a bunch of survival rounds running away. And guess what? He didn't do that. He actually was willing to engage, try to mix it up, and try to make some big shots. We did something that Demetrius Under kept doing. We talked about this last time we were on air. And Canelo saw that. And I said that if Demetrius was going to fight and looking for a fight Canelo, he was going to have to fix that because Canelo's smart enough to catch it. And that's jabbing and dipping your head down, looking at that canvas to not see your opponent. He got his eyes off of Canelo, and that which allowed Canelo to throw a really not a textbook uppercut, because you want to kind of bend in the knees. He was just able to pop that uppercut, and it caught him numerous times. And what damage they did to Saunders' face, man.
Well, I don't think he necessarily dipped low to throw it, but he definitely put his legs behind it and his hips.
Yeah.
When he shot, you could see kind of the tension in his legs and in the other parts of his body as he threw it. He even kind of shouted out. Maybe didn't make the big shouting noise, but you could kind of see him exhaling as he threw it. And what Billy Joe did actually was he kind of tried to turn away from the punch.
Right.
Because that punch was intended to kind of land on his chin, if not on the left side of his face. But when he dipped to try to get away with it, he caught it flush on the cheek and on the eye socket, which obviously was the end of the fight. Now, again, I don't condone Billy Joe's antics outside of the ring.
Right.
I think he's done a lot of things that are really abhorrent outside of the ring.
Right.
And I'm a Billy Joe fan. But I do think that a lot of the criticism I was hearing from people, especially people who've never even boxed, calling him a pussy, calling him, all kind of other words. Look, it takes cojones to step inside AT&T Stadium, walk down in front of all of that crowd, get into that ring, and try to win rounds against Canelo. And what I will say about the quitting is that if he actually wanted to quit, he would have gone down after that shot, and he wouldn't have gotten up. He actually did get up, and he tried to survive the rest of the round. And when your trainer is putting on the end swell and notices that there's a dent in your cheek and your eye is closing and you can't see, I don't really think there's a point in going on anymore, because there was no path to victory. Well, there's only a path to getting brutally knocked out, if not having permanent eye damage.
The only thing, Milcar, is I think people are bagging on him and calling him a quitter, giving him a taste of his own medicine, because the fact is that when Daniel Dubois took a knee after the same type of energy happened to him, BJ Saunders went to social media, Instagram, made a video saying that he would never do that. That you would have to break his face, his jaw. You would have to carry him out. He would go out on his shield. And to see him not get back from that stool to continue on, well, he's kind of eating his words there about saying how prideful he was and how much of a man that he is. And people are holding him, especially him, to his words. So I think that's why the backlash was pretty severe, I'm going to tell you this. Yeah. It wasn't a great fight. A lot of folks were making it seem like it was a really good fight. But I had some family over. My sons watched it with me. Two of my very close friends that I grew up with, they actually came down. We watched it. And I sat there and I watched everybody so excited for every punch that was being landed. And you know what? And it wasn't because they knew that this fight was going to be like, you know what I mean? Their anticipation was that this fight was going to be exciting. It was satisfying because it literally shut up a guy that talked so much out of his neck. And you know what I mean? It was like we never got that satisfaction when Hector Camacho talked all that smoke with Julio Cesar Chavez. Chavez gave him a beating, but he didn't stop him. He didn't make him quit. This was satisfying to see Canelo stop him, which I was very hesitant in believing he could do that.
Yeah, well, Canelo actually, when he walked back to his corner at the end of the 8th round, actually told Eddie Reynoso that the fight is over. Like, I broke his eye socket. He actually said that. And yeah, Billy Joe Saunders should not have criticized Daniel Dubois the way he did. It was unfair criticism, and he shouldn't have done it. I mean, there are kind of differences that happen for sure, but I really don't think that a guy, and it's tough because again, he did make those comments before, but when your training staff decides to end the fight, that's their job. They're there to protect your safety. A trainer should not allow his guy to go on and on. I was listening to G Funky earlier today, and he was bringing up the case of Antonio Margarito. Well, you know what? His trainer allowed him to go on, and now he's got permanent eye damage. You know, and he's got to live with that for the rest of his life. You know, these boxers have parents, they have brothers and sisters, they have kids, much like the rest of us do. And
it's karma, I think. That's the sad part. It is karma with BJ. I agree with you. I think that, you know, unless you're in there, and you could see his eye was shut. Like, he was literally, because it's hurting so much, he was squinting the other eye. And you think about this, is that after Canelo hit him, it blackened really quick. But after they stopped it and he was walking out, you saw that camera view pan around him, and his face was literally, now his eye was completely closed up. You know?
Completely closed. There was an indentation in his cheek.
Yep.
You know,
egg weights. That's all I can say.
He's got two great trainers in his corner. He's got Ben Davidson and he's got Tibbs.
Yep.
You know, they're telling you, look, we're going to call it because, look, I've broken bones in my body. I've broken fingers. I've broken my feet. I've broken my foot. It's excruciating. Imagine that in your face.
Right.
You know, that's the thing. You know, it was Pedro Angulo, wasn't it, that took a lot of heat once?
With Nora.
When he sustained an injury. Look, the eye is very particular. You know, the eye is probably the most sensitive part of your body.
Bro, I can't even take eye drops. Let me tell you that, okay? When I go to get my glasses and you do that, you know, when they have to test your eyes, you know, they throw that stuff to open up, to dilate your pupils.
Yeah.
It's so, the doctors literally get so frustrated with me. And it's not even me. It's my eyes have their own mind of their own. They're like, you know, shutting up and all that. I'm almost like a virgin, you know, trying to get in there. And they're like, no, not going to happen tonight, buddy. You know, so I don't blame the guy or his trainer seeing that and going, you know what? It's not worth it. You're not going to win this fight, especially in Texas. I said that. He could have had the whole state of Texas, the whole field of Texas, anything out there. Trust me, he wasn't going to win that fight on points. Just wasn't. And that's why he fought a different fight than normally he did in the past. He's done in the past.
The biggest problem he had with the strategy that he used, because let's face it, he was right there in the middle of the ring doing his best to be competitive with Canelo.
Yeah.
Whether you give him 2 rounds or 3 rounds or 5 rounds, Eric Lorda had him up 5-3, as did Chris Mannix. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I can definitely see 3 rounds that went to him.
Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see those 3 rounds. And you know, look.
But here's the thing, Dave. This is what I was going to say real quick. Mm-hmm. That's 3 rounds more than Callum Smith. Callum Smith went the distance.
Yeah,
but
and it was shut out.
Every single round. It was not competitive. He was not trying to win. You know, Yildirim, he was not trying to win. You know what I mean? Yep. This is the first time since probably the Kovalev fight that you've seen a guy in there who's actually trying to win. And unfortunately for Billy Joe, he doesn't have punching power at 168. No.
And you know what? Those pity shots, are? This is the game plan they win in, which I thought it was a good game plan. First off, okay? It just didn't work, and it didn't work because Canelo obviously has now developed a full power puncher at 168. But the punches that Suanders was trying to do was keep Canelo's hands up and busy. So by the time Suanders sneaked in a big punch, he'd be away, not in the punching range for Canelo to throw. But like I said, when you watch it, Canelo really didn't have any respect for Saunders' power, so he was able to walk him down and move forward. You know, Saunders needed a little bit more oomph to those punches to kind of humble Canelo. And you know what? He couldn't muster that up. He tried, but he couldn't. And even when he did try to land big shots, they were kind of grazing shots. They didn't really land completely flush on Canelo to make him think about going back in.
Yeah, he only touched him really badly. I think there was like a left hand that landed pretty clean as a power shot. I think he landed an uppercut. But the biggest thing was the jab, which kind of puffed up Canelo's face a little bit. But Canelo was able to handle him, and we shouldn't take away from what Canelo did. Like, he took on. I'm still going to say this. Billy Joe is a tougher test than the guy we're going to talk about next.
You think so, huh? Honestly, I think it's a completely different type of fight. I think here. I don't know. I think it was Jesus. Somebody in here said something that I completely agree, which is, I think, Jesus said it. Yep, Canelo still has bad habits. Still goes in a straight line. Here's the thing. Like, I go back again. Suanders went in there fighting a different fight than I expected. I thought it was going to be survival to 12 round Suanders and say, I went the distance and Texas stole the fight from me. That's what I was prepared to watch and hear, okay? But he went in there, like you said, trying to win this fight. We don't know. We still didn't get the answers that a lot of us were posing. A lot of guys were making videos saying that Canelo doesn't know how to cut off the ring. Canelo doesn't know how to do this. Because he really didn't have to do any of that. He didn't really have to search Suanders.
No, Suanders was staking his claim to the center of the ring. Yeah. He was circling every now and again, but he wasn't really getting backed up all that much. And, you know, Lara at 154 hit a lot harder for that division than Billy Joe hits at 168. And Lara was able to kind of tame Alvarez a lot better than Billy Joe could. He just doesn't have the kind of power you need against a guy like Canelo.
You know, the thing I give Plant, though, is this. He is slick. He's quick, which Suanders was quick, too, and was getting in some of those punches. Plant's a big kid, and Plant's a more natural 168er than Suanders is, you know. Suanders' stance was really wide, is that karate stance, which is not very good if you're trying to be elusive. You know, you have to get your legs back together to get out of the way of the punches. I thought that was really weird. And that's when I was like, holy smokes. You know, I think he's thinking about actually trading with Canelo, showing that he was the bigger guy. And that's when I think everything kind of fell apart for him, you know. The other thing, too, is that, I tell you what, the one thing I did see about Canelo that I've seen some changes is that he did study the southpaw. Notice in the first and second round and all throughout the other rounds, he was touching the lead foot of a southpaw, and then he would let his hands go. Even that reaching to the body shot, it was something to give the southpaw guy to start looking for and thinking about, make him start dropping those hands a bit, even though they're just little nagging shots. But those are some brilliant moves and tactics that Canelo was doing. With Plant, I don't think he's going to be able to get away with any of that stuff. I think Plant's a little bit smarter, and I don't think Plant has the plan of standing and trading. I think Plant knows he's not going to be the puncher. I think he knows his place and his role between the two, to tell you the truth. So for me, I think it's a little bit more tougher fight, and it's going to be a lot more tougher to figure out Plant, because I just don't see Plant wanting to engage with Canelo.
Well, that was essentially the breakdown right there. Billy Joe didn't run. Billy Joe didn't go into survival mode except for like the last 30 seconds of round number 8. And he obviously felt that he couldn't do his box and move, full committal to pity pat, making it ugly, and win in Texas, in the United States. Like, he knew that to win this fight, he was going to have to stand and trade with Canelo and hold his ground on the inside, which is what he was attempting to do and did a little successfully for 2, I would say 3 rounds, but it wasn't enough. And
he showed cojones. The thing he always talking about, suck my this and that, he definitely showed it on that night, which was surprising. And so, again, you got to give him his kudos. I give him his props. He actually fought like a man, got out there and wanted to show that he was there to win and not just survive. But it was the wrong plan, because he doesn't carry, like you said, he doesn't carry the power to execute like that. Whereas Plant, we just don't know that much about him to even honestly say anything about him, you know? Yeah.
That's what I was going to say about Plant. One, he's totally untested.
Totally.
People felt Billy Joe was untested. Like, this guy's nowhere near the level that Billy Joe was fighting at in terms of competition. Number 2, he's big, but not bigger than Kovalev. His jab isn't better than Kovalev. He's not bigger than Callum Smith. His jab isn't bigger than Callum Smith. His hook isn't better than Callum Smith. So Canelo has experience fighting big guys. And if he's going to essentially do what you described, David, and be very cute and defensive, he's not going to win a fight against Canelo doing that.
I didn't say he'll win a fight. I don't think he'll win a fight, but I definitely think he'll be able to stink up the fight where it's a cat and mouse fight, and those are the type of chess match fights that we don't like to watch. It's a turnoff, especially if it's going to end up on pay-per-view. If it doesn't go to DAZN, which I don't see why not. I've actually spoke to some of the guys that were with Plant, and they were like, no, we're going to go where they want to do it. They're going to offer us the right amount. We'll take that fight. And they've been pretty adamant. I got an email from his publicist today saying they're ready and preparing for this fight. They've been getting ready for this fight. So, whatever, here's the thing. Canelo fights like he's always got something to lose. And Plant is going to have to fight like that if he wants to win. The problem is that I don't see him fighting like that, because the things that you just mentioned, he's never been tested. BJ's talking about, everybody talking about Billy Joe, his, not fighting. And he had two names on there that's more recognizable than any of the names that are on Plant. There's nobody that stands out.
I would say three names. I'd say Chris Eubank Jr.
Yes.
David Lemieux. And Andy Lee. And then you could also throw in other guys from the past, like John Ryder, who's shown himself to be a solid guy at 168, and others. You look at the last opponents for Caleb Plant, you've got Caleb Truax, Vincent Feigenbunz, Mike Lee, Jose Uzcategui, and
say Vincent's last name again for me.
Uzcategui.
No, say Vincent's last name for me.
Oh, Feigenbutz?
Yeah, say it again for me. Yeah, say that again for me. I just like hearing you say it.
All right, and Porky Medina.
Right.
Those are his last 5 fights. That does not prepare you for actual world championship level fighting. Definitely not against a guy like Canelo. I just don't see you going from single A baseball to the Major League All-Star game in one fight. Like, that's
traditionally, you are absolutely right, but I would worry because since there's not a whole lot to see or understand what this kid's about, this kid can come in with something with the unknown. We might show something we have yet seen from him.
Caleb Truax touched him up a few times.
He did. That's why, look. And Caleb Truax, got to give it. He's a warrior. He's a seasoned vet, okay? But he was not the same guy that we've seen him in the past. He wasn't swarming over Caleb Plant. He was a step behind. Great quote that Luis de Cuba Sr. told me when I was over there visiting Vegas. He said, when you see your fighter start stinking, it's the end for them. That's it. They're no longer fighters. It's over. And that's very true. You see fighters that overthink. Once they hit that certain age, they start overthinking. They've been in so much wear and tear. They start overthinking what they're going to do next, So, for Caleb Plant, there's a lot of unanswered questions. My thing is that though he's got a strap, he's got to defend it. And when you got a strap, that's your job, is defend it. Whether you've answered them or not, they're going to be answered on September against Canelo Alvarez.
Yeah, and it's great to hear that he's eager to take that fight and that he's preparing for it because, I would actually like to see a competitive fight, regardless of the fact that I think Canelo should be considered the clear favorite in this fight. And, I'd like to see Caleb Plant test himself. And
there's a few things that Plant could watch and study what Canelo does, okay? And the obvious is that Canelo loves to leap in with that body shot. He doesn't have an issue throwing it from an outside range. He's got to look for that and capitalize that, counter it, The other thing is the jab. Suanders showed that if you got a good jab, you could sneak it in between those gloves. He was marking up the face of Canelo, like you just mentioned a little while ago, circling him, giving him angles. Don't be there too long for the receipt with Canelo. And remember this, once your back touches those ropes, Canelo doesn't wait for you to figure it out. Your back is against those ropes. He actually attacks. He does that fairly well. And he was doing really good against Suanders, which he was touching the feet and boom, he was being explosive. Okay. I thought the bad part about Saunders that he was doing was he was being right there in front of him, which is fine. If you're going to stand and try to hold your ground, that's that's perfect. But it's boxing, guys. Why didn't he not step around, pivot around Canelo? Create open shots, turn Canelo, make him get off of his base of his feet so he lifts up so there's not a lot of power when he does counterpunch you. Those are things that Plant has to look at and understand that if he does get trapped, because eventually he's going to have to stand and trade with Canelo. He's got, it's really hard for me to see a guy that's never really fought a perfect fight against one of the best right now of today. I don't see that happening. So that's some of the things they're going to have to throw in. And I think Plant should be fighting nothing but big guys right now to get him ready and sparring, and then half of your sparring, you throw in little guys with speed because Canelo's big, he's strong, and he is quick. He's got some good hand speed at 168. He was matching Saunders a bit there with the hand speed as well. Yeah,
and you mentioned the hook that he throws and kind of leaps into that. The reason he's able to get away with that is because of his foot feints and his head feints.
Right.
He creates that, what's going to happen here? And then when the guy's off guard, he leaps in. It's very effective.
It is.
And I've seen him throw the feint uppercut as well with great success. So he's a master of the foot feint and the head feint, and he's a master of the fundamentals of boxing. And he also happens to have a great chin, and his power should now be, considered good.
Respected.
At respected at least. It's when you break a guy's orbital bone in his cheek in 3 places, that's not easy to do. So Caleb Plant has a lot that he needs to prepare for. And your suggestion that he engage with, I think you said big guys, right?
Yeah, I say big guy because that Canelo's going to stalk him. He's going to push him. Is going to try to overpower him. Is going to hit him in those arms, which you saw Canelo is very well at doing. He doesn't mind hitting your shoulder. Doesn't mind hitting your elbows. Just to get that shot, what he does is he's trying to just, crack the wall, bring it down a little bit so that it's enough peekaboo for him to sneak in those big punches that he's seeking out to land. Plant's going to have both worlds. A guy with speed, with footwork, that knows how to close that distance, because once you get your back against those ropes with Canelo, bro, he knows how to close that distance. He really does know how to. But here's another thing that the Plant folks should be looking at. Take advantage of Canelo's rest period. Canelo takes some rest periods, which that's what Saunders was doing. That's a page you rip off from Saunders that he had kind of exposed. He took advantage of those rest periods that Canelo was doing. He capitalized on it, and that's why you have more people saying that he won certain rounds. But again, I just thought that Canelo fought his fight. He controlled it. He had the ring generalship. He rested when he wanted to rest, and he turned it on when he wanted to turn it on. He was almost like he was giving him a bit of a treat every single time, a doggy bone, for him to take home and stuff. But then when he was done and ready to open it up and play again in the sandbox in the playground, guess what? He was kicking dust in the face of Saunders. But that's where Plant and them, they've got to have a much more solid game plan against Canelo in September in order to become victorious. God, man, that's a really steep hill to climb, in my opinion, to get to the top of the Canelo hill.
Well, I'm going to point to something that Andre has said here in the chat. He says, and he's talking about Plant here, that he kind of goes to the ropes, and that's going to be problems for him, which I agree. He does allow himself to go to the ropes. I don't think that's a very good tactic on his part. And
that's where the big guys would come in, though. If you have big guys sparring, they're pushing you back, it will condition his legs to start moving, getting out of there, or it would help out their trainer go, okay, this is what we don't want, No,
this is true. But what Canelo does when he gets you on the ropes is he really attacks that body.
Yes, he does.
And that's going to be wide open against the guy who's taller, which is exactly what he did versus Kovalev and exactly what he did against Callum Smith to success. My issue with Plant as well is that the Callum Smith fight in December was actually first offered to Caleb Plant, if memory serves me well. And Caleb Plant didn't take it.
No.
So what exactly has happened between then and now, or then and next September? Well, he fought Caleb Truax. I don't think that that's great preparation for a Canelo fight. You know?
Well, it also shows you that Plant is not the one in control of his career to get great preparation for the Canelo fight. You know, my biggest criticism of Al Heyman is one big one, and that's he's never really developed a fighter yet. I'm trying to think of one right now, you know, that they've kind of brought from the ground up, you know. I think they've done a great job marketing him. I think he does a great job paying his fighters. They make tons and tons of money, but they kind of keep their fighters stagnant. You know, they kind of hold them back from getting these potential experience, whether you win or lose. That's where you get the experience. Canelo wouldn't be where he's at if he didn't lose certain fights or struggle with certain fighters. You know, you can give heavy criticism of Canelo by saying, "Look, he looked like crap against Lara. He lost against Lara. Trout gave him a runaround. You know, look at Floyd. But the truth is that we wouldn't have known any of that if Canelo's career was in the hands of another promoter that was afraid to put their guy in with somebody. That's why nobody's respecting Caleb Plant.
David, to be fair, Canelo wanted those fights, and De La Hoya didn't want those fights. Like, he had to, at a certain point, the boxer has to step up and say, I want that guy. I want this unification fight. I'm not fighting anyone else. And look, I said December was not a good look. Right. I don't really know. I don't think he's done anything in the past few months that have prepared him for Canelo. And he was against the ropes against Caleb Truax. He was getting touched against Truax. I mean, Mike Lee took him some rounds. I mean,
Mike Lee.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not a good sign for a fight with Canelo. I was talking to G Funky over the weekend, and my mind was fixated on champions. But he brought up a good point, and I agree with it. I think the toughest fight for Canelo right now would be David Benavidez. I honestly do. He's strong. He likes to fight on the inside. He's a pressure fighter. He's tall, but he uses his length, on the inside, and doesn't necessarily stand outside at a distance the way Kovalev or Callum Smith did. And he's got a good chin. I don't know how well his body's going to hold up to a body attack from Canelo, but I've always felt that that's a more competitive fight than Caleb Plant. Caleb is not a guy even like Anthony Durrell, who he beat up, obviously. Yeah.
Here's the thing with David Benavidez. I don't know if he would. I think he'd be competitive, but I don't think he'll beat Canelo. And the reason I say that is because I don't think he's in his prime yet, to tell you the truth, Benavidez. I still think there's some fights in him to get him to that point. And when that point comes, I think it's going to be a far more difficult fight for Canelo. The longer Canelo waits for David Benavidez, I think it's going to be more dangerous for Canelo to get a win over David Benavidez. David Benavidez, let's not forget, he's still a young kid. He's still maturing in his
around the same age as Edgar Berlanga.
Yes.
He just has a lot more fights under his belt. So the other thing too, once Canelo unifies this division, which I expect him to do, there's not really much there for him to do at 168. So I almost wonder if he tries to lure guys up like Jamal Charlo, like Gennady Golovkin, like maybe Andrade, or whether he heads back down to 160. I think he'll probably stay at 168.
Yeah, I think he's going to stay at 168. That's why he's opened to a third fight with Gennady Golovkin, saying that if he wants the third fight, he needs to come up. I think that I don't see him going anywhere from Eddie Hearn. I know there was a question in there. Do you think when is going to be the end of him working with Eddie Hearn and DAZN? I honestly don't think that's going to end anytime. I don't
Best
even know.
production ever of Canelo fight.
Yeah,
I mean, there's no comparison between these entrances and the staging and promotion of these fights. and what Golden Boy was doing with Canelo.
Exactly.
I mean, the on Saturday was fantastic. It really was.
And I don't know what Chris Mannix is talking about, saying that it'd be difficult with PBC, when PBC has already shown numerous times they're willing to work with anybody. If you're going to fit the bill and get their fighter paid, they're okay with that, you know? And you know what? Canelo is a free agent. If Canelo sees that, you know what, the only way I'm going to get this title, and if the money's right, and you're telling me I got to go to Showtime pay-per-view, I could see Canelo going that route. Why? Because Canelo's learned his lesson. Sometimes being loyal to everybody is not beneficial for yourself, for your career, for your pocket. So I could see Canelo jumping ship for a minute to go to Showtime if they can't figure it out. But I have a feeling they're going to work it out and it'll end up on DAZN.
Yeah, I mean, it's the advantage of having a fight-by-fight contract when you are a winner like Canelo. You know, the long-term contracts are obviously a little bit more secure, but he's leveraging everything he has on these fight-by-fight deals, and is just basically taking the best deal available to him. So I don't actually think that Fox is going to step up and put up the big money that DAZN does. I question whether even Fox is going to be staying in the boxing business past this year. As for Showtime, I just don't think Showtime has the budget of I don't think they have the budget of DAZN at the moment. You know, when you look at their card, you know, there was a reason why the Charlo pay-per-view was on pay-per-view. They couldn't pay him to be on Showtime.
Look, DAZN, without even marketing this fight, which is not unusual with a Canelo Alvarez fight. They don't do a whole. They don't. You know, boxing has kind of moved away from the 11 cities, especially with COVID right now. The 11 cities things. You know, a lot of stuff. You're not seeing like the amount of push on television or anywhere getting it. 70,000 plus people showed up in Texas to watch this man fight against the Gypsy Traveler, and that tells you very much how alive boxing is and how much. Canelo still has a very strong Mexican and Mexican American following, you know, that showed up to cheer on for their guy. So Caleb Plant and his team, guys, this is an easy decision. You go where the money's at, and if anything has proven with Al Heyman is, hey, show me the money, and we're good, and that's it. You know, this is not Bob Arum. We're not dealing with Bob Arum, where Bob Arum has to have all the stacks on the deck. You know, this is Al Heyman that's okay with you taking a little bit more so that he can get some money in his pocket as well with this fighter. As long as this fighter gets what he's asking for, I think the fight's doable. I think it happens. And like I said, speaking to some of their guys, you know, they're like, yeah, we're for it. Let's do it. We're ready for it. Now we're ready for it. And that's reassuring for me. Hopefully it keeps that same energy and we see it happen September. But it is boxing. I don't always like get too overly excited because, well, it's boxing. Look at what happened here with Teofimo Lopez. It's off. It's being moved to another date, supposedly.
Yeah, that's because of the Floyd card with Logan Paul. So,
man. Andy Ruiz looked like he had so much ring rust, but it was a good fight, good comeback fight. Chris the Nightmare Oriella. Let me ask you this. Was Chris that much good, or was it Andy just that bad that night?
I think it was a combination of Andy being rusty, Andy working with a new trainer for the first time, and Chris Arreola really stepping up under the tutelage of Joe Goosen and being highly motivated to win that fight, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Much in the way that Derek Chisora was highly motivated to take out Joseph Parker. It was kind of a very similar situation, especially since both of those guys fought on the same day.
Yep. Yeah. You know, I always said that Chris comes to fight. That guy, if there's one thing that there is no lack in, is his heart. He showed up. He gave obviously some real heart attack hiccups to Andy Ruiz and Eddie Reynoso and the Andy Ruiz fan base. But how I looked at it, because immediately people were jumping down the neck of Andy Ruiz saying like Deontay Wilder destroys him. Easy money. You know, styles make fights. And just because Wilder was able to mow through very dominant over Chris the Nightmare doesn't mean that, you know, he's going to be able to do that with Andy Ruiz. As you just mentioned, ring rust, having a new trainer. The chemistry really wasn't there yet, in my opinion, man. I don't know what you were thinking, what your thoughts were when you were watching it. But I was like, their chemistry has not clicked in yet. It hasn't clicked, okay? Now, I did say about that weight issue here, Amilcar. Was it going to help Andy? Or could it affect it? I think it did a little both for him, dude. You know, he still was huffing and puffing, and not having that extra pound of flesh there to absorb punishment from Chris's punches, I think it did affect him, and that's how he was wobbled and dropped.
Well, the thing is that muscles require oxygen. Fat doesn't. Fat is an energy source. So the fact is, his weight actually has not dropped all that much from previous fights. It did, obviously, from his last fight against Joshua, where he really ballooned up. What's changed is his body composition. So he's got a lower percentage of body fat and a higher percentage of lean muscle mass. The issue with having a lot of lean muscle mass, if you look at a guy like Anthony Joshua, for example, it's easier to gas out. Those muscles need oxygen, you know, and your lungs can only work and your heart can only work to a certain threshold before you literally just start fatiguing.
Here's another thing, too, is that whatever they're doing to lose that fat, to build the muscle, doesn't necessarily translate into boxing. Because if you're not preparing yourself for the boxing distance, it doesn't matter how your muscles look, like you mentioned with AJ, because there's a different cardio that you do with boxing. You know, James Toney didn't have this, you know, workout body, but the guy never gassed out, and it's because he sparred so much. He was a guy that actually hate running and hate doing anything else. All he ever wanted to do was spar. So if Andy was just solely working on trying to change this physique and never really conditioned himself of how long it was going to go in the ring, and mindset was that Chris is overcooked, he's done. All I'm going to do is go out there and have a showcase. That's where the game plan, it fell apart and got exposed.
He probably had planned to work a lot less harder than he had to. And Chris is the kind of guy that makes you work really hard to get a victory. That's who he is. You know, you're not necessarily going to just get him out of there with one shot. You know, you need to put your punches together. You know, he wasn't actually using as many combination punches, especially on the inside, as he had in the past. He was really working off the jab and kind of boxing pretty well. And that also probably switched things up because Andy Ruiz had to kind of go get him at multiple times in the fight.
Yeah.
So you're right. I mean, training-wise, you know, they did a lot of work in terms of the physique. I don't think they were prepared for Chris Arreola that showed up the way that he did. But I did want to ask you something before, from the undercard, actually, from the Canelo Saunders undercard. I wanted to get your thoughts on Soto against Takayama and that 9 TKO and stoppage. My own opinion is that
Lawrence Cole.
Takayama, honestly, I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
This guy got a pretty much semi-retirement. What was he, 37?
Yes.
To try to win a 6th world championship. And he put on a display of heart and guts, and at multiple times in the fight, high-level boxing ability, especially for a guy that age. And I think that the referee did a terrible job by stopping that fight when he did.
I did. I mean, look, it's Lawrence Cole. It is him and his dad. They're terrible. They're honestly the ones that make Texas look even bad. I mean, anytime those guys are involved, you know something fishy is going to happen. And they always deliver. They always deliver. This was a very competitive fight, man. If anything, it stole the show. All the other fights were like snoozers. I didn't even bother watching them. I was busy doing other stuff. I was barbecuing. I was doing a bunch of other stuff. And finally, we got something that was worth a bit of that, money that you put in for the $100 subscription, right? And the guy steps in and he stops it. You stop it in between a guy that was punching back. You stop it against a guy that's experienced.
I've never seen a guy get stopped while throwing a punch.
Yeah, and it wasn't like there was not even like more than 15 seconds in between the response of Tanaka throwing a punch back. I could see if there was actually a full minute or two of him not responding. That's when a ref steps in. That's when a ref goes, okay, let's keep it. Even at times too, Amilcar, we've seen this. A ref starts getting in a little closer, and he starts eagle-eyeing them to see if their body language is different. What's going on here? Lawrence Cole jumped in and just out of nowhere. It was like somebody was in his earpiece that said, okay, I've had enough because we're running out of time. I got to get going. I want to watch Canelo come up next. No problem.
Look at the guy's record, man. I mean, he's fought everywhere. This is a guy that went the distance with Chocolatito.
Yes.
You know what I mean? This is a guy who went on the road in the Philippines, in Panama, in Mexico multiple times, in Thailand, right? This is a warrior. The true definition of the Bushido spirit. And to go out like that, especially when he's trying to, it was debatable whether he was even going to be going on with his career.
Right.
At a certain point a couple years ago. And don't forget, his last fight was against Riku Kanu in 2016, and he essentially had one fight since then in December, because this was like a comeback for him. So he was off from essentially 2016 until 2020, and he was trying to come back and win a sixth world title, and I just felt really disappointed in how that played out for him. And just very disappointed by it. He was on the big stage. It would have, what can I say? And then you want to talk about guys not wanting to continue. I mean, a lot of people are throwing shade at Billy Joe for not continuing on or fighting with his trainers to continue on with 3 broken bones in his face. What about Nagy Aguilera, man? What about that?
Dude. Oh, my God. The Oscar winner goes to... but you know what? Look, all jokes aside, Nagy, he didn't want to be there, which is kind of weird because Sanchez didn't look like he wanted to be there either. I'm not impressed with Sanchez, to tell you the truth. I think he's a decent technician. I think that he's a guy that they're going to have to keep in the back burner until he's fully developed. He's got progress, but dude, he's not a killer in there. He really isn't.
He's a bridgerweight.
He is.
He's not he can't hang with the big boys.
No.
Like Tyson Fury or AJ. I mean, let's just be serious.
They're talking. I mean, look, Luis Ortiz, put him in there if you want to end it quick for him to find out whether he's really the goods or not. And I'll tell you what, that Ortiz eats him up alive. As old as Ortiz is like 185 right now. Oh no, he's 186 years old. But in all seriousness, I'm trying to like Frank Sanchez. I really am. But watching that fight, I'm kind of happy that Nagy just, bowed out and said, you know what, I don't want to be here. I didn't see him doing much to him. I really didn't. And I was like, look, this kid doesn't carry.
You got to get a guy like that out of there. I'm sorry.
You do. And that told me everything about it. I'm like, bro, this is Nagy. Nagy's there to be put away. And you basically hit him with some of your best shots. And Nagy took it the way Canelo took Triple G's punches. That's not supposed to happen if you're a big puncher in the heavyweight division. Not supposed to happen.
So I'm just going to shout out Andre again. He says 37 years old, 1 month's notice to fight across the globe. And still he put on a hell of a show. Takayama is always fantastic to watch. I agree. Legend of the sport. A definite Hall of Famer. Now, back to Sanchez and Aguilera. Mm-hmm. Just ask yourself, what would a Derek Chisora have done to Aguilera? Forget about even AJ or Fury. What would a Hrgovic have done to that guy? Look, I just don't see him as a legit heavyweight contender. It's going to take a lot of convincing for me to see that. I think that his best weight is probably 200 pounds. But obviously, as we know, cruiserweight is not the glamour division that the heavyweights are, right? And the money's at heavyweight, and he's probably trying to cash his chips against a big name. But personally, I see him losing to a lot of guys that are in the top 10.
Yeah. I mean, when you say, what do you think Chisora would do to Nagy? What do you think, God, I don't know why I can't think of his name. Maybe because he hasn't fought in quite some time, is the Ukrainian kid that unified the cruiserweight. Why can't
Alexander Usyk would have put on a show.
Yeah, Usyk would have stopped this guy. And, would have battered him up. Usyk's not the biggest power puncher in heavyweight division, but he's a value puncher that systematically breaks your guys down, And, going back with Frank said, even putting him, got him with Eddie Hearn, he's doing all this stuff. I mean, you can mold him to a great technician, but I don't even see that he has great footwork, to tell you the truth. He comes forward. He tries to land shots. He's trying to land big shots. He's open to be countered. I'm with you all the way on this one. I think he needs to go. I think they need to rethink where he needs to be at in the heavyweight division.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot say with confidence that he would be Otto Wallin or Efe Ajagba. No. I can't say that with confidence. Maybe he steps up in his next fight and fights like a Zhilei Zhang, the Chinese guy that gassed out in his last fight.
I tweeted out that night. I go, now I understand the reason why Canelo is sparring Frank Sanchez. He's not that much of a killer. He really isn't.
No. And what would Joe Joyce do to him?
Oh, my God.
With the juggernaut, with that nonstop jab and herky-jerky style and physical kind of boxing? I mean, to me, it just does not look good for him in the heavyweight division.
Give him Daniel Dubois. Let's see what Daniel does with him. He needs a good comeback fight. We need to find out whether or not Frank Sanchez can he deliver the goods. Or is he just a work in progress that shouldn't be on the undercard of a Canelo fight? They should have put
Bogdan Dinu next, which is interesting. But yeah, I mean, he cannot continue to fight these guys.
No.
And expect to get any notoriety in the heavyweight division. I mean, it's nice that you're on Canelo undercards, but I don't think anyone was excited about the fight with Aguilera, because what's really to be excited about?
He was turning fans off that night so bad. I mean, you're a heavyweight. You stunk up the place, and you get hand speed, and you stunk up the place. It was just bad. Yeah.
So, A-Rod 83 Boxeo says Sanchez will knock him out. I don't know who he's speaking about, but maybe you could tell me that, because I mentioned a bunch of names. I think that a good fight for him, and I think it would be a good fight for Tony Yoka, would be a Tony Yoka fight. I mean, that's a good head to get on your resume.
Yeah,
you take the O on the cube, or if you're Frank Sanchez, you take the O from an undefeated Olympic gold medalist. But
is Frank ready for that? I don't think he is. I think Frank is one of these fighters. He's not a young guy, but you know what? Frank is going to be one of these guys that you have to know how to match him to make him look good. And and that even backfired on Saturday night. They matched him with Nagy. That's like a no-brainer there. And guess what? He still couldn't look that good against the guy that was there. A guy that was half in and half out.
Oh, A-Rod, I totally disagree with you. I hope you're trolling. He says Sanchez will knock out Joyce. No way. No way. Joyce has got the best chin in the heavyweight division, from what I've seen. I mean, he can take a shot. And his activity is a problem for everybody. And his size, this guy, Sanchez is very undersized, guys. They were making a big deal about the fact that he showed up in the 230s, that he had put on weight. 230s. In the modern heavyweight era, That's not big.
No, that's a tweener in today's heavyweight division. You know, what's up to everybody in the chat room? Chicano Prophet, ¿qué pasó? How you doing, brother? A-Rod, we got Andre Rodriguez, G-Funky's in the house. Of course, my man Jesus M is always here. LT, how you doing, brother? No, let me see. We got a couple more guys here. Lovers Lane, how you doing, man? And thank you for the guy that gave us a thumb down. Always, if I don't get that thumb down from that regular person that comes to our videos, I feel left out. I feel unloved. So thank you. Every time you come and give me that thumb down, it lets me know that you're tuning in. So we appreciate it. But all the big thumbs up, man. Thank you guys as always. Don't forget, uppercut that notification bell. Don't leave it up to the judges because they won't let you know we're on live on Leaving in the Ring. Felix Verdejo got himself in some real serious trouble here at Milcar. When you're going to talk about premeditated, I know they're talking about the death penalty for this kid in Puerto Rico. Here's the thing about this guy. Obviously, I definitely want to hear your thoughts about the whole situation with Verdejo. Yeah. But here's a guy that I was not very high on. When he came out of the Olympics, a lot of folks were, riding this kid's coattail. And I remember tweeting out, and I had a few people in the industry that were upset about me saying this, but I used to call Verdejo fans pendejo fans. Never impressed me. Didn't think that he was going to take the mantle away from Miguel Cotto. Didn't see that even near, but for some reason, people were kind of putting him in the same light. Then he finally, people got tired of him. He wasn't fighting regular, got into a motorcycle crash, kept him out of the sport, but then finally gets in with Tanaka, who did a life and death fight between the two, and finally gained the respect that he'd been yearning from the fight fans. He finally won it. How short-lived was that?
Yeah, very short-lived. I was about to say that it was his most impressive performance, and it was a loss.
Yes.
I think Ismael Salas was doing a pretty good job with him. As to the allegations, obviously innocent until proven guilty. The burden of proof in our criminal justice system is always on the prosecution. There's a presumption of innocence versus a presumption of guilt. I think that's a good thing. Personally, I'm not in favor of the death penalty at all. Not because I'm against people being necessarily killed for doing horrendous things, mostly because it's been so abused and so many innocent people have gone to death row that I just don't think you can justify it. If you kill one innocent man, and they've killed a lot more than that, that's one too many. So, we'll see what happens. It looks like the evidence is kind of really against him. I know
stacked.
They took
it is stacked against him. Yeah. His buddy came forward. It was caught on camera. He was on the bridge. The severeness of what was that? I'm sorry.
I just don't know what the hell he was thinking.
I that would require us to have the ability to get in that head. And I tell you what, I don't think I would want to be in his head on that day of calling this young lady who he had an affair with for 11 years and impregnated to meet him, and then said, no, don't meet me here at my place. Let's go to the bridge. I believe it was at her place or his place that they're supposed to meet up. But not even him. What about his buddy, bro? His buddy was like, well, I didn't know he was going to do this, but you didn't even do shit to stop him from doing this. I've been around good friends. This is how much of a good friend I am. If my buddy does something stupid, okay, like put his hand on his old lady, I'm the first guy that actually will pick him up and slam him and hold him down and whisper in his ear, like, what are you doing, bro?
Yeah.
Where this friend participated in this, was like, I'm with you, bro. I'm ride or dying with you. Now your life is screwed. It's not my place to say the guy goes on death row or life in prison. We leave that to the peers that are going to be in front of him to gather the evidence, like you just mentioned right now. But I tell you what, it's really hard for me to be compassionate to a person that did this to a woman that he once supposedly loved because he had a relationship with her for 11 years. But not that. You had your seed.
They go back to middle school, apparently.
Yes, and you had your baby. Your baby, man. I look at my kids. I have 27, 20, 25, 23, and 20 years old. And I still, to this day, I look at my kids and I look at them as babies.
Yeah, of course, because you're a father.
As babies, man. Or I look at my wife and how tiny she is, and if I'm just trying to fathom what this man did to this woman. I'm like looking at my wife going, fuck, I could barely do anything. I'm a big puss, to my wife.
All of the people out there that for whatever reasons can't have children and are like dying to adopt kids, or I mean, look, there's no justification for it. It was a horrendous act, allegedly, but it looks like this was the case. But it still hasn't been proven yet in a court of law, but it looks like it's the case. And I was hearing rumors about different stuff. I mean, a Raw Boxing TV had mentioned that something about it was his wife's family that people think did it, but I don't know if there's any credence or credibility to that. I'm just not. Yeah. It's a horrible situation, and
it's horrific, man. It's sad.
It's two innocent lives gone for what? I mean, it's just crazy. It's just crazy.
I don't understand men that can't look. He talked about I'm a public figure. I'm this, I'm that. I don't even know what that means. It's a child. Yeah, the most would have happened was your wife probably would have divorced you. And then you were going to have to move on, and you were going to take that major blow of her taking 50% of what your earnings is, or whatever the case is. But
have that yet.
Right. But that's the gamble you're making if you decide to lay adultery with another person. I mean, and to go to that extreme to hide something. Like, let me ask you this, dude. My wife is an ID watcher, and I'm sorry that we're kind of going away from boxing and stuff here, but I thought there was something to talk about, and especially, it is part of the boxing news, and it is part of the boxing community. But my wife is into ID. She watches. That's all my wife will watch: documentaries about crime and ID and all that. And the one thing I take, and I can only watch maybe one or two, and I'm like, all right, dude, this is enough, man. It's enough negativity and stuff. I work along with the side with boxing and talk to people in boxing. That's all the negativity I need in my life. That's all I could take. But to watch these murder cases after one after another, I'm like, none of these people learned it? You're not going to get away in this time and error. You're just not. The forensic and the science behind this stuff it's gamed against you.
Yeah, not unless you're like some rich person who, has an army of lawyers and can get away with these things. But no, an average person, and not forget about just not getting away with it. You just shouldn't do it. It doesn't make sense. Now, just to pivot quickly back to boxing, David, something that doesn't make sense to me, returning to the heavyweights. What is up with the bounty hunter walking away from an elimination fight against Hogan?
It goes back to your who's advising these guys? I don't get advising these guys and telling them, and I mean, we know who's advising these guys, and they're not really. Look,
I actually don't know who's advising Michael the Bounty Hunter. Apparently, he's a free agent. I don't know who his manager is. What I do know about him is he's from the LA area. But
he's hanging out. He's hanging out with the Logans, and he's hanging out with certain people that are obviously in his ear. But here's my thing. Going back to my Vegas trip, which I had a great time and loved. Okay, didn't want to come back. Had a great time going to boxing gyms and visiting fighters and talking to certain people in the business and doing all this. I got another trip planned in August. I'm going to be heading up to Coachella, visiting the gyms out there, spending some time with various peoples out there. But what I mostly enjoy when I go out there are two things. I love talking to the guys that have been in the game for 50 years, Mokar. And I love watching sparring. Sparring by far is better than watching the live fights that are happening in our televisions, right? But talking to the older guys, like a Luis de Cuba Sr., who gives you a glimpse of the inside of how they've worked on developing fights, how they worked on progression, getting progress to their fighters, and how they're doing this and all that. There's this formula that shouldn't be broken, okay? And he was saying some really interesting things. Like, look, the problem is that everybody wants to be a business person in the fight game. There's a chain that you should follow, that you need to build trust around your team. If you don't trust your team, then you shouldn't have them. You need to seek out a better team. But, when you start thinking you could be the accountant, the manager, the publicist, the promoter, and all these different type of hats, a lot of the times you're not going to be successful, and especially in this type of business, which is boxing. These guys are making bad decisions because they're looking for the biggest paydays. We're fighters, and in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, what they did was entrust their team to get them the fights, to get them the big money fights that was there waiting for them. And you're seeing a lot of guys drop the ball on that. They're skedaddling away from potential good fights that can bring either guys that are on the fence of being a fan of you, or that were never a fan, and like the kids, Logans or not, I'm telling you, they made a jump over everything. They got a lot of people that hate them and want to see these kids get their asses dropped.
Look, he wanted a heavyweight title shot. He was on the cusp of essentially possibly getting one. I think that he probably just looked at Hrgović and said, you know what? I don't think I can beat that guy. There's no other reason for not taking this fight. There just isn't. And I want to get your opinion on something, Dave.
Sure.
Something that just came up in the chat. I'm hearing a lot of talk about Bivol being one of the only guys that can kind of successfully take on Canelo. And Bivol has said that he can make 168 pounds. He is a little bit smaller than a lot of the big 175 pounders. What are your thoughts on a Bivol Canelo fight?
After watching Bivol's last fight, I mean, I don't know, man. Is it interesting? Yes. The problem is, though, going to 168, it would kind of tarnish the win if Canelo got it, okay? Because I think the most is what people would want to see Canelo jump up like he did with Kovala. Because the criticism would be like, well, he didn't fight him in his way. He had to come down, blah, 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 blah. He obviously, had the bigger advantage. Why not go up to his school, and to his playground and fight him there at 165? If at 175, I'm all in. I'm all for it, I still would pick Canelo to win. I think Bivol is a little slow. I think he's kind of predictable. And those type of fighters, Canelo kind of tees off very, very well. The time reaction, the feints, the head movement, the body work of Canelo, it's on point. It's right now. It's really hard to see anybody from 160 to flirting into 175 to kind of school or beat Canelo. In my opinion, I agree.
And he just took on, I think, was it the number 5th ranked? Actually, it would be 6th because Jean Pascal has the regular title.
Right.
In the WBA, Craig Richards, the British fighter, and that fight went the distance. And Richard had his successful moments there. I'm also seeing talk about, so I have Canelo winning that fight. I'm also seeing talks about Andrade. I have him beating Boo Boo as well. I mean, Boo Boo.
I do too.
That whole leaning over defensive tactic. I mean, I just see Canelo ripping a vicious uppercut to him and working the body, which he struggled with again in his last fight. I mean, he was getting touched up.
Yeah. I honestly, after seeing what Canelo did to Suanders and stopping him, having him retire on the stool after that broken orbital bone, I see him knocking out Demetrius, to tell you the truth. Boo Boo. I like Boo Boo. I like Boo Boo. I don't have a problem with Boo Boo's style. It's not the most prettiest, but it's effective. But I don't think it's going to be effective to what Canelo can do. Canelo, like I said, is going to see that dip to the waist, okay? He's going to capitalize on those little flaws that he hasn't corrected, and I don't think you'll be able to correct on a fight getting ready to get in with Canelo. I see Canelo honestly touching Demetrius a little bit more than he was able to do against Saunders, because guess what? Demetrius actually does stand and trade. He's not really a runner like people are trying to claim him. He picks his moments to stop and trade with you, and he tends to sit there a little too long for the receipt, because he's actually trying to pay back you when you're throwing your punches. He will punch with you, and that's really what Canelo wants, because it gives him the opportunity to let combos go to the body and the head, which would be the paintbrush. He paintbrushes your whole body. So I don't know about you here, Milcar, but I think that Canelo stops Boo Boo like in the 9th or 10th.
I pretty much see Canelo stopping everybody at 168, to be honest. With the exception of maybe Benavidez, who I think could probably go to distance. He's a tough guy and a big guy.
Absolutely.
But I right now, if you had to ask me, does that fight go to distance? I don't think it goes to distance.
No. I mean, look, even though people have been clamoring, mostly the Gennady Golovkin fans, for the Triple G rematch, if it happens at 168, I think he stops Gennady Golovkin.
He stops Triple G.
Yeah, But I think that Triple G will probably, honestly, you're going to probably call me crazy, but I think Triple G gives Canelo a better fight than what we saw from Saunders and what we might see in September against Plant than anyone else in the mix. Even against Boo Boo, even against all these guys right now. I think Triple G actually puts up a much more effort and lands more cleaner punches on Canelo than anybody else.
I think the Triple G of maybe 3 years ago, but the Triple G that was getting beat up by Sergey Deverenchenko back in 2019, that guy gets stopped at 168 pounds against Canelo. And same with Camille Arameda. He was getting touched by that guy. It's just, unfortunately for Camille Arameda, he doesn't have much punching power.
No.
But Canelo's still a relatively young guy, right. Sergey Deverenchenko's up there in age, just like Triple G, and he was busting him up, man.
Yeah, he was
really busting him up. So that's not a good sign for me in terms of Triple G, and also,
well, he's more accurate. Let me say this, okay? Because like Philly put, he's too slow. No, he is. He really is. But in terms of accuracy, you have to admit, Gennady Golovkin is more accurate than the other guys that we're just mentioning right now, okay? And he's familiar. He's familiar with Canelo, So there's a bit of a not of a fear of knowing what Canelo's going to do to you, because he's been there twice. So that probably keeps him in the fight a lot longer than a lot of us are suggesting, and also being accurate. But I'm on board with you. I think Canelo stops him late in the rounds, but I think that Triple G puts a better fight, and not necessarily saying that he's going to be in the fight, but I think he puts a better fight that we saw with Saunders or
because he hits harder and he takes more punches. He takes way more punches.
But he's not
prepared for this.
No, no more.
Other than Canelo, since 2018, I'm going to just list his opponents: Vanis Martirosyan, Steve Rolls, Sergey Deverenchenko, and Camille Arameda. While Canelo's only been fighting like monsters, or like great boxing guys for the most part, if you take away Yildirim. He's prepared. He's been at 168 now. He's settled there. He's fully grown into the division. Triple G's, if they do fight, I'm guessing it would be his first fight at 168. Right. I don't really see it going very well for him, dog. That's just my opinion.
There's always two ways that can happen. I've always said this in boxing: it either it's going to go north, very good for him because his body's rested. They had time to go back. This is the fight that he can get up for, because this is the fight he wants the most, is that third fight with Canelo, the revenge. He wants that revenge. It's in the back of his mind. It's the pit of his stomach. Everything there is been festering up, okay, where he goes in with a solid game plan. He's got a great chin, his accuracy. The only thing that he's a step behind would be the speed against Canelo. or it's going to go very south. He's old. Your punch is the last thing to go, but your legs are the first thing to leave, and we don't know how well he would receive a punch from Canelo at 168, because remember this, when Canelo entered the 160, he still was growing into that size. He still was growing into that weight. He wasn't comfortable. He wasn't in his prime. He wasn't the punching power guy that we saw of today at 168. So that's the unknown that we don't know. And that's why I'm picking Canelo to knock him out and stop him, because I think this is just a different animal in Canelo at 168. But again, fighters, when their backs are up against the wall and they got to fight for their right in history, they'll do it. We saw that just 2 weeks back with Chris the Nightmare. We saw what he was able to do when everything was stacked against him. So I never count out a fighter, but you got to, the eye test is telling us, our heart's telling us and everything, that it's going to be a Canelo night.
Yeah. So there you have it.
There you go, guys. I'm glad that we're back here on Monday. We jumped on a little earlier because, I got some things to do, and I think Milk Card does as well and stuff. But glad to be back here on Monday. You'll see us here next week on Monday as well at 4 p.m. on Leaving the Ring. Don't forget, hit that like button, hit the notification bell, and subscribe to the channel. You can catch the archive on iTunes, iHeart, Pandora, all that good stuff. And we'll talk to everybody soon. Again, don't drink and drive this weekend, guys, because you will spill your beer.
Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Ladies and gentlemen, damas y caballeros,